Big Tip live broadcast. And today I am really pleased to have with me on the line my friend Nicki Friis. Nicki started his first company when he was just 16 years old. And today he's the CEO of Nicki.com. Get it? He's got a really good spelling for it. It's a growth advisory board that works to help companies to build growth strategies. Nicki also helps companies acquire, retain, and monetize customers, which is something he knows a great deal about. Basically, if your company is a platform type scale up, anything that looks like Facebook, Dropbox, Airbnb, Uber, Slack, Google, Amazon, Spotify, New York Times, Tesla, or Tinder, or Peloton, then he's your man. He's going to help you get all of those. He's going to help you acquire all of those customers. So, Nicki, welcome back. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm honored to be here, and thank you for the great introduction.
It's your achievement, not mine. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for doing this. So listen, one of the reasons why I wanted you back is because you recorded with me a couple months ago a podcast episode, which dropped today on the One Big Tip podcast. And it was the subject matter. The subject for that particular episode was really interesting. It's about how to acquire customers, right? And that's really the holy grail of what startups really need, right? Because you can create this great platform, but if you don't have anyone coming to it, then it's not it's not going to really grow anywhere. And a lot of these products that we talked about, like Uber, Uber doesn't make sense if it's just going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? It's only going to make sense if it's grown up at something, to scale, and you can replicate it, and also you can personalize it, for each and every person. And I think that's really the crux of where your specialty comes in. Can you please? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Jeff, I just wanted to say, so I mean, it's correct how I see it, at least when acquiring customers and acquiring new users. Of course, it's super important for any new startup. But it's also a balance, because you also want to have your retention rate at a certain minimum before you actually start acquiring too many customers, right? And how I tend to go about it is that you have what I would like to call traction channels, and you have growth channels. And with the traction channels, that may be something like car magazines or car forums or something like that, if you are building any startup within that area, right? So that is a place where you can target your audience quite specifically. However, it's not really scalable, right? So that's how I kind of tend to look at the different types of channels. But what I also want to emphasize here is that one thing, of course, is acquiring customers. But if you have a leaky bucket, or you have a funnel where with every time one person comes in, then one comes out, then you're not growing as well. So you have to have like a certain foundation of retention. At least that's what I advise everybody to. But definitely it's a balance. And you also see a lot of the companies that I work with, they have investors, of course. And some of them have angels, some of them have VCs, and some of them have even other kind of institutional investors. And some of these investors, they are just pushing them. We just need hundreds of thousands of users, and then everything else will come, right? But I tend to go the other way and kind of see, okay, can you get 100 or 1,000 customers that just love you? And can you build some kind of stable retention rate? So that basically means when you look at the retention curve, that it flattens out at some point. It can be 10%, it can be 4%, but the only thing that really matters is that it flattens out at one point, because then you have something to build upon. And that's at least what I always advise my clients to do.
So it's interesting that you say that. A couple things come to mind as you're describing that. So first of all, if we take a startup like Uber, right? So Uber, in the United States, why did it take hold? At least over here, it's because taxis in the United States sucked. right? It was just a really piss poor experience, which actually made the conditions for a company like Uber to come around and actually, and actually be viable and be like, oh wow, like we can actually disrupt what's going on over here and break up these unions and break up these, like in New York City where you have the medallions, that used to sell for millions of dollars, and now it's like, now they're practically worthless. A lot of people are stuck with these mortgages,
Mhm.
to just to finance this stuff. But
Yeah,
one of the things that's interesting, what you talked about, is retention, right? Because it's one thing to give service one time to one person, right? But you have to be able to do that again and again and again, and to
yeah,
delight them each and every time, right?
yeah,
And that includes even if they have an issue. The driver took me the long way and charged me an extra $10 for the for the ride, or like this person, I got into a car and it didn't work, or something like that. So there
yeah,
are all these anomalies that frankly Uber is not necessarily responsible for, but since you acquired the service under their brand, then guess what, they now are required for that, right? They are now uh, they now need to be able to provide that kind of service. How does
yeah.
that work in the startup world? I mean, especially when you're talking about these crazy growth rates, right? Where you create a platform that is only really viable when you get up into the six-figure or seven-figure uh, um, amount of users, on a particular platform. How does that work? Like, how do you measure that? That just seems like a mad frenzy in order to get everything into place. But there's actually, like some easier ways to manage that. No?
Yes, I think we're talking about multiple things here, and how I kind of tend to bucket it is under one umbrella that we call, you can say, defensibility, right? And when we talk about something like a two-sided platform, like with Uber, where you have, of course, the supply side and you have the demand side, then we also talk about market liquidity, right? So, what is the level of liquidity that you need in a certain market? And that market can be just a small city, it can be a country, it can be a state, it could be anything in that regard, where you can basically get to a certain amount where you have the demand side and you have the supply side, where you can basically match them together and you can and they can receive mutual value, right? Um, and to get that market liquidity, there's different strategies, of course. And if you have read the book by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, Blitzscaling, right? They very much talk about blitzscaling, basically meaning that when you find something that acquires customers just in a literal sense, then basically scale it a lot. You have to get immense amounts of capital from institutional investors or whatever it may be, and then you just need to scale, and you have to pour all your money into specific channels and just test everything in a rapid scale. And what you see here is that some companies survive, and I believe that the biggest reason why some of these companies survive is because they reach market liquidity, right? Because I mean, Uber wasn't the first, Lyft wasn't the first as well. There were multiple other companies out there, but what they did was that they targeted a small percentage of some market. For example, one of the maybe not that famous growth hacks that Uber did was that in one of these small cities inside, I can't remember which state. I'm not American, so it's not that familiar to me. What they
Yeah,
did
there's
was
only
that
50 of them. It's not like you need to know them all, right?
no, and then there's, I don't know, municipalities, and there's cities, and there's a lot of different things that's very different from Denmark, at least. But one of the growth hacks that they did was that they hired or recruited a lot of hot girls. And then what they did is that they installed the Uber app on the phone, and then they went to really fancy bars and clubs where Uber knew that the people who go to these bars and these clubs, they have money. And of course, the girls here, they were quite hot. So the girls went to the bars within these clubs and within these bars, and then they were like, "Can you order an Uber for me?" And of course, what the guys was then saying was, "What's Uber?" And then the girls, of course, had them installed the app on the phone, and then of course order them an Uber, right? And that was kind of one of the growth hacks they did in a certain market, and that is what is quite important when we talk about getting liquidity within a certain, for example, for a two-sided marketplace here, is that let's take a city like Copenhagen, because that's kind of familiar to me at least. So of course, what you want if you're building a two-sided marketplace, like something like a taxi business or a transportation business like Uber, you first of all, you need some kind of supply who can drivers who can drive cars, right? And then you can build the demand side afterwards. But it's easier to do within a small percent of a market than it is to, let's say, take entire in Denmark at one point. And then of course you can also segment even further. You can go for only Uber, what is called Uber X, which is these like more luxury cars, right? I can't remember which one it is. And only target certain user groups who have some kind of higher income, right? Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense, Jeff.
No, no, it does, because basically what it is that that's the other part of the equation, right? Because Uber is nothing without their drivers, right? And that's really been a big problem. Well, it's both a problem and a blessing at the same time, right? At least over
Yep.
here, right? You have a lot of people that are underemployed or out of work, but they happen to have cars, right? So they're able to sign up and be able to, to provide a service on this platform, right? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the, how they treat them or how they pay them or, any of that, right? But basically what it's doing is that, they're creating this ease of use, with a very standardized procedure that if I have a car, submit my license, submit my insurance, show the title, whatever it is on the car, and I can be out taking clients. And even if it's a question of, like so I'm in the Miami area, right? So if I'm driving to Boca Raton, why would I not take somebody with me, and make a little bit of money as I'm driving, 50 miles north? Right. That was at least the original idea, but other people have taken it like, no, I'm going to do this full time or more than full time, or, or I'm going to use both apps. I'm going to use Uber and Lyft and, whichever other one, is out there. I think it's really interesting on how they really need to pair up the experience to make the experience both for the drivers as delightful as possible, but also for the passengers as well. Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can actually bring to other platforms. What would you say is like another good example that we can talk about that that sort of uses that same premise, where you need to scale up very quickly and provide, like a great great service both to your providers and to the customers that happen to be using it?
Well, I don't know that case super well, but let's take something like Peloton, right? Here during COVID. So one of the things that I really kind of stress to some of my clients right now is here during COVID. How do they adopt COVID, and how do they adopt new user behavior? Because what we see, of course, is that when something like this hits and things close down, either your business model will weaken, it will be broken, or it will be strengthened, right? And for something like Peloton, to come up with one example here, is that their business case has been strengthened here. The use case now is that people would rather, or they, as an alternative, they have to buy a Peloton bike to actually exercise. Of course, there's also other alternatives out there. But what we really have to think about now here during COVID is that what is the alternative that clients, our users, our clients, our customers has transformed into? For example, for something like, let's say, Instacart, or with something like what's called in America, I can't remember, Just Eat, right? Of course, those are also business models that have basically strengthened over time. But with something like, let's say, cinemas, or something like speaking engagements, they have basically been shut down and broken. Of course, then what we see is that businesses are also transforming into newer business models. So let's say you are a psychologist or something like that, then you are transforming into online sessions instead of physical sessions, right? So that's something that we really need to think about, and we need to think about it right now. We need to think about what are the alternatives that business have adopted, and will they go back to the previous solution, or will they stick with the new solution, with the new alternative? Is it a better alternative? And then we really have to think about, do we need to rethink our business model now, right?
So it sounds like what you're saying is that using the Peloton example. So people obviously either are not going to gyms or they don't feel safe going to gyms, even if even if they're guaranteed all of the safety protocols or whatever. So they'd much rather get a Peloton bike, like in their house. So in that respect, it's strengthened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess what the big question is, what would be the next step as, for example, like once COVID dies down, like once, everyone gets vaccinated and once we don't have to, everyone be afraid of each other as we're walking down the street. Like what's next? How do you maintain that, that hold on the market, right? Without, without sacrificing, the product that you've already put together, right?
Yeah. So I think businesses really have to think about what kind of users will stick with us afterwards, because some people, they just love going to the gym, right? But they are maybe afraid right now, or maybe they can't even do it. I mean, in Europe and Denmark, of course, gyms are closed down. So what is the current alternative again? And then of course there will be some people who would rather exercise at home, and now that they have the Peloton, it's more flexible, it's easier to get started, and there's no transportation time, and they can go straight to the shower, and they don't even need to brush their teeth, I don't know. So of course we really have to think about who are the users who will stick. And of course what we can do then is that we can survey them, we can interview them, and we can try to look on the quantitative side as well. What kind of users will stick after COVID and after gyms open? And then we can think about, okay, so what kind of alternative can we either suggest to them, or should we just let them churn? Of course, most often we don't want to churn customers because we would rather try to capture all. But there's also, of course, there's always value in taking a stand and kind of be on brand and not creating an octopus of a platform, right? With too many features and too many functions. So I believe if it was something like Peloton, I would definitely try to see, okay, who are the users who actually feel like this new way of working out is bringing more value to their lifestyle than beforehand, and then focusing and doubling down on them. If not, then they should definitely focus on how can we transition into this new use case that will soon happen. Maybe it can be partnerships with the gyms, right? It could be Peloton bikes within some of these gyms. I don't know if it even makes sense. It could also be not a what can we call it? A physical a bike that you can have at home. Sorry, it can be that they will actually start creating bicycles that people can actually use on the road, right? As an alternative to that, and then they can maybe sync the data automatically, which another brand like Argon 18 can't do, just to come up with some other bicycle brand, right? So we have to think about, okay, how can we take our current product and the current use case, how can we adopt it to the personas and the users that we want to target, and how can our current product add value to another potential use case that may happen in the future when COVID disappears.
Interesting.
Is how I see it.
Yeah, what it is that for example, like where I live, we have those bikes that you can just, they're at the bottom of my building, right? You just go and rent them. All of those are, they're GPS tracked. They have little computers inside. They know exactly where they are, how fast they're going, who's renting them, all that stuff. There's a mountain of data going through all that. You have the same thing with the little scooters, the limes and the bolts and all that.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's really interesting how, without even thinking about it, they could already be thinking about, what would be the next steps. Like you said, post-COVID, like how are they going to exist and how are they going to thrive, in this world, and how are they going to grow once people are able to go to offices again, if we ever go to offices again, right? I wanted to get your take on, on another product that's been taking the digital marketing world by storm over the past couple months. It's called Clubhouse. Have you joined Clubhouse yet?
Yes. I have.
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting about Clubhouse is that, for those that don't know, first of all, right now today it's only on Apple devices. But really what it is that you can drop into a live broadcasted program, right? And just
Yeah.
and you can listen in on other people having a conversation, and you can also very easily be invited up to the stage so that you can talk, ask questions, and do things like that. One of the things I was particularly impressed with is the elegance of how the interface is designed, and basically what features it does not have, right? For example, you can't message anybody, right? So there's no
Yeah.
there's no messenger going on. You need an invite, right? So that creates scarcity.
Mhm.
And for the most part, the platform works. It works pretty damn well, right? In terms of getting people online. And what's happening is that all of a sudden really you have these really big names that have really adopted it. I mean, I'm getting notifications like Grant Cardone and Ty Lopez, and all these guys. They're going on multiple times a day,
Yeah.
just to chat, with everybody.
Yeah.
Um, my big question to you is, where do you see Clubhouse's model? Is this something that they're probably just priming themselves to be purchased by Facebook, for example, or is this something they'll be able to grow into something much bigger, or is it just a platform that is ultimately going to be merged into a much larger platform ultimately within like the next 2 to 3 years?
Hmm. I'm not sure, of course, but I can see that one of the guys that I really look up to, Andrew Chen, the former head of growth at Uber, he's a part of growing Clubhouse as well. And I mean, of course, one thing that they could do would to be acquired by another company, but I really see them basically going out on their own and becoming a new platform. What I can see in some of the groups that I'm following is that people are already started being what can we call it, have a too high frequent habit around it. People are actually already feeling FOMO of not being on Clubhouse, right? And of course, that is, you always have to think about what are some of the bad actions that our product can basically serve. But I see that they will start monetizing Clubhouse in one and another way. And of course, one of the business models that many other social platforms adopt is something like advertisement. Could be the case. I'm not sure if it would work for something like Clubhouse. What you also saw with something like Snapchat, when they launched the stories part, and then it's Instagram. Of course, they started copying them, and that was right before they really started to monetize their platform, right? And people, of course, still use Snapchat, and today it's actually quite a good, it's quite an all right ad platform. They've basically just copied all the different actions and functionality that Facebook have as well, um, and it's quite good. But again, they lost a lot of users based on being maybe a bit too fast to monetize and then too slow to basically bring this innovation into the market and to compete with Snapchat, of course, or with Instagram. Um, with Clubhouse, of course, uh, we see other companies like LinkedIn. At least I've heard rumors already trying to see how can they copy something like Clubhouse, and maybe something like that will happen as well. And I believe is if I were Clubhouse right now, I would still look into how can we gain market liquidity such that if a company like Facebook, Instagram, Google, LinkedIn will eventually copy them, then they still have the market leading position within that small niche, which is audio, right? Um, because eventually other companies will try to compete, and eventually other companies will start to compete, and they really need to get to some kind of density within the market before they start to monetize, in my opinion at least. Because when you start putting ads or monetizing your app in different ways, then you will also scare some people away, because you will add friction to the experience, right? So I believe that they will wait with monetizing their app until they have some kind of market liquidity, and then they may start to monetize using ads or another way. I'm not sure how.
Either some type of membership, like to get on, or how many followers you have. I just found it incredibly interesting how it started out as this thing like, hey, just drop in. And like I said, just the elegance of getting on and being already able to chat with some interesting people. That's huge. It's like, we used to think that, for example, LinkedIn, like, I'm connected to a number of, CEOs, but I can't really say that I've conversed with them. Right. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I happen to be, friend number 2,463, on your LinkedIn profile, nice to meet you. Right. But with Clubhouse, I could actually, if I raise my hand and get invited up to the stage, I could be chatting with them directly,
Yeah.
and that, I think, is huge, that it really just breaks down the barriers to go straight to the source of who it is that you're following, who you want to learn from, all of that neat stuff. I think it's great.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've seen people chatting with Gary Vee, of course, free of charge, and with Christo and other amazing people who you really want to learn something from, right? Depending what
Amazing.
industry and what kind of person you are. But yeah, I agree.
Exactly. All right, cool stuff. Nicki, can you please let everyone know how they can learn more about you, and how they can reach out to you directly if they'd like to get in contact?
Definitely. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, add me as a connection on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Clubhouse. I'm still short of 700 followers or something like that, but growing slow, and that's all right. Otherwise, feel free to visit my website. It's nicqi.com if you want to learn more about what I do. I'd be happy to chat with you sometime. And then Jeff, thank you again for having me on your show. It is just super fantastic to talk about our mutual passion here.
Exactly. It's like, nerding out on this stuff, great, growth concepts, and getting more clients, like this is my jam. I could talk about this all day long. So thank you so much for being here, Nicki. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.